comfortable. They should be.
You starting right this minute?
No, we don't have. I'd like to welcome everyone here, day 2 at Farm Fest. Hopefully you had some of those great crisp cake pancakes this morning, sponsored by Minnesota Farm Bureau, kind of a middle day tradition at Farm Fest. Got a great day today following this forum. We got the Linder Farm Network noon show, many special guests between 12 and 1 o'clock today, the State Pork Ambassador, meeting last year's ambassadors and also having the new state pork ambassadors introduced. Then at 1:15 today, our feature forum is transitioning to the next generation of farmers, kind of talking about some of the opportunities and challenges that exist out there as we go through that transition. And then 2:45 today, we end with a program by Farm Bureau Financial Services, who are right next door here, titled Retire at Zero. Tomorrow, of course, our final day of Farm Fest, tomorrow morning is the U.S. House Ag Committee listening session and conversations in the field for the next Farm Bill. We'll have Chairman Michael Conway from Texas, Ranking Member Colin Peterson from Minnesota, and about 9 or 10 other U.S. House Ag Committee members here making some comments on the Farm Bill, but also listening to comments from all of you. I get asked the question, if I want to speak tomorrow morning, what do I got to do? The best thing to do is show up between about 8:30 and 9:30 tomorrow morning, and they'll be taking lists of those that want to make 2-minute or less comments to the U.S. House Ag Committee. And of course, we wrap up tomorrow. We'll be recognizing 75 County Farm Families of the Year from across Minnesota. Today, our panel is a National Ag Policy Roundtable, and we like to do this from time to time, bring in some national leaders to talk about the issues, not just the next Farm Bill, but trade and all the other issues that are out there. And I think we got a great gamut put together. We got a super panel of folks that are involved at the national level. And our moderator today is going to be Mark Dorenkamp, who is the farm anchor for Brownfield Ag News for the state of Minnesota. Mark's been here for, what, is this your third Farm Fest? Third Farm Fest. Does a great job. Let's welcome Mark Dorenkamp, and I'll let him introduce our panel members.
Thank you, everybody.
And by the way, I'll be out in the audience after they all talk, and we'll take your questions out here. So,
thank you, Kent. And are we on? There we go. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, everybody. And good morning. Welcome to what should be a really informative discussion. I want to thank our guests for being here today, participating in this. And each guest will have an opportunity to talk about whatever it is that they want to. I do have some introductory questions. And as Kent said, we'll also give you an opportunity to ask our panelists questions, too. We're going to start with the president of American Farm Bureau, Zippy Duvall. Zippy, I wanted to ask you about an issue that's very important to livestock producers in Minnesota. That's gray wolves. A federal appeals court this week ruled that the animal will remain on the endangered species list. What kind of problems are livestock producers in the upper Midwest seeing as a result of gray wolf populations that are increasing, and what will it take to remove them from the endangered species list?
Well, the ruling yesterday highlights the importance of us having reform in the Endangered Species Act, and it's just important. And we keep, as farmers and ranchers, we keep impressing that on our congressmen and senators, because it looks like it's going to end up taking some congressional action to stop that. The losses that our farmers have had because of the wolf, the fears put in some of our children in some part of the country. I actually witnessed seeing a place in Arizona where they had to have an encaged area for the children to stand and wait for the bus because of the wolf. So it's just ridiculous. It's time for us to have reform in Endangered Species Act. It's time for us to bring some common sense and sound science to it. And if you look at the history of the Endangered Species Act, where the success rate has been less than 3%, you know that that's a failed policy. So let's take what we really need to protect endangered species, and that is partnerships with our farmers and ranchers, some incentives. Instead of treating us like they're our police and trying to make us do things, let's be partners and find solutions, because we know the solutions to those in our own communities better than any bureaucrat does.
I'd also like to just compliment you for making the trip to Minnesota and have you talk briefly about the importance that you've put on getting across the country to meet with not only Farm Bureau members, but just folks in rural America.
Well, I'm a farmer from Georgia. I spent 30 years dairying, and now we have about 400 beef cattle, and this is my 31st year of growing broilers. We grow about 750,000 broilers. I go back home to it on the weekend so I can experience the same things that you experience each day. We've got to make payroll, deal with the regulations, food with the employees or labor that doesn't show up for work, all the things that you deal with, I have to go back home and face it. I think that's important. It takes me back to reality, because sometimes in that bubble around Washington, it's not reality. And everybody needs to go back home and experience that. But I made a commitment early on to travel to all 50 states in Puerto Rico, go out on the farm and talk to farmers and ranchers about how the issues affect them on their farm. So when I'm in front of the president, or whether I'm in front of the Secretary of Perdue, or wherever I might be, I can bring some reality to that. And it has educated and informed me to a point where I can be a good president to any farmer and rancher across any part of this country.
Thank you, Zippy. I think the rest of our panelists would define heat and hot a little bit differently than you would. Everybody else has a tie to Minnesota, from Minnesota, but being from Georgia, 100 degrees here doesn't feel like 100 degrees in Georgia, does it?
It doesn't. I was in Iowa a couple of weeks ago, and it was 100 degrees there. My wife and I flew home to Georgia, and you couldn't hardly breathe when you got off the plane. It was 100 degrees there, but the humidity was about 90%.
Again, welcome. We also have Gary Werdish here, the president of the Minnesota Farmers Union. Gary, we had a chance yesterday to visit for a few minutes about what's important to members of the Minnesota Farmers Union, and you talked a lot about inadequate safety net and making sure that federal crop insurance, the commodity title programs are adequate to support farmers when times are tough financially. And so if you would please begin by talking a little bit about our current farm bill and the current safety net and what you would like to see tweaked in the next farm bill.
Yeah, right now the biggest problem we have on the farm is no profits. You know, a lot of that is with the high inputs and the low commodity prices. You know, you go back, say just 20 years ago, $3 corn would work very well. It doesn't work anymore. We've transferred, the last farm bill, we've moved a lot to the insurance program. The insurance program worked well a couple of years ago when we had high commodity prices. For a few years, you could lock in a pretty good protection on your insurance program. Right now, we can't do that. We need some reforms, not only with the insurance probably, and with the ARC and the PLC too. We have ARC. The ARC program in Minnesota is a good example. You got some counties, the farmers qualified for $50 to $70 an acre payment. The same right across the road from a farmer in the next neighboring county got zero. So there needs to be some reform there. So that needs to be equalized out to have the protection. You know, as a farmer, we don't need to be guaranteed a profit. We just want to be able to stay in business. You know, we have the weather to deal with. We have trade agreements. There's so many political, agriculture is in a political world. We're in a global economy. So we're fighting, we're dealing with political stuff throughout not only our country, but in the world. But so as a farmer, you can't control the weather. You can't control them political arguments, but we just need an adequate farm bill, safety net to keep us in business to survive into an upcoming year. Farmers are always optimistic. If you weren't optimistic, you couldn't be a farmer. This spring, when you put stuff on paper, you couldn't cash flow, but yet we still put in the crop. But on the other side of that too, we talk about farm bill. The health care is a very big issue that's come forward too. And that needs to be addressed too. That's affecting every farmer out in the land. It's affecting every person in this crowd out here, and that's an area that definitely needs fixing too. And hopefully now we come to some agreement where both parties sit down and try and arrive at a fix.
Gary, talk a little bit about the efforts of the Farmers Union to get a better idea of what issues were really important to folks across the state. You conducted a survey, and the results of that survey were recently announced.
We conducted rural issues discussions, or rural voices discussions in March and April. We held 14 of them throughout the states. We were pretty much every corner of the state and every community, or a lot of all the regions. And this last week we held 2 more, and these 2 are focused more on the farm bill. But obviously, the issues that rose to the top was we need an adequate safety net in the Farm Bill. Not only, you had the commodity title that needs some work, and you got the dairy farmers. We hear from dairy farmers the milk margin protection program is not working for them. So that was the top issue. Healthcare, as I just mentioned, that every meeting that came up, that was healthcare was an issue. We had one member came to one of our meetings and he talked about he had a $28,000 premium for his insurance premium. He had a $13,000 deductible. So with the two of them, he was paying $43,000 if I have my math right. But anyway, $43,000 was the number that he was paying out of his pocket for healthcare insurance. And as he was working with his lender doing his cash flow for the coming year, the lender tells him you got to cut expenses. He said when he looked at everything that he was doing, the only thing that he had left to cut that wouldn't hurt his return on the farm was health care. So that was an issue. It's definitely a big issue. Infrastructure was an issue. We heard a lot about broadband. Up in northern Minnesota, we had top of Zippy's comments about the wolf. This one particular farmer came and actually said that he had the previous year he lost about 20 of his calves to the wolves. But he was, as typical farmers, you're in the late 50s, and he has a son that works in the Twin Cities that would like to come home and help him on the farm and eventually take over the farm. The son has a good job in the Twin Cities, providing health care, but with his job, he would be able to work remotely from the farm if he could. So when he comes home on the farm on a weekend to help his father, trying to do work on the computer to do his job, he said it takes him practically all day to do what he could do from his office or from his home in the Twin Cities. So he said without a broadband, he said, I can't come home and take over the farm. We held another meeting on another farm, a young dairy farmer, a couple, and they had their son working with them on the farm, 120 cow dairy herd. They just put in 2 robotic milkers, and they happened to be in line, so they had a strong signal, so they were able to put in that robotic milker. Without that, they probably would have got out of dairying. This way, with the robotic milkers, they were able to keep a family-owned dairy operating, transfer it to their son, and just hire a minimal amount of labor. So, broadband is an issue. We look at a national level. We haven't put a major infrastructure bill spending in rural infrastructure, major infrastructure since the Eisenhower years with the interstate highway system. So we're long overdue in figuring this out. We got to figure out our infrastructure is crumbling. You can blame both parties. You can blame partisan politics. You can blame a lot of stuff. But the fact is, it's crumbling, and we have to figure out a way to fix it. Because if we don't fix it, we talk about trade agreements. That's a lot too. And actually, at one time, we had the advantage of a lot of the companies or countries that were exporting our crop. We're competing with to export our crops. We're losing that advantage because the other countries they're putting money into their infrastructure, and we have not. So we don't have the advantage that we had. So that's probably long enough. But that's we're faced with big problems, and we have to take the politics out of it and work together.
Thank you, Gary. And again, if you want to follow up to any of the topics that he addressed there, you'll have an opportunity later on. To Gary's left, we have Bruce Schmoll, the chairman of the U.S. Meat Export Federation. We've had market analysts here the first couple of mornings talking about price volatility, and exports certainly really are an important driver of that, and we tend to focus a lot on China. And Bruce, I wanted to first ask you about the U.S.-China relationship. President Trump has instituted a 100-day action plan, and we've seen China lift its import ban on U.S. beef after a 13-year absence. So if there are cattle producers in here today, what should they expect to come from that short-term or probably more so long-term?
Well, thanks, Mark. Short-term and long-term both, we are very happy to have the China beef market open again. This has been a long time coming. It's taken a lot of effort on the part of many people. The years I've been director on the U.S. Meat Export Federation board, that's all we've heard from beef producers. When are we going to get China open? And there have been so many hurdles in our way. And so I think our expectations are that we've got this great, huge market open, that we're going to have a chance to move product in there. Gary talked about profitability. That's the bottom line here. We're in a global economy. The chance to tap into that beef market in China could be a real shot in the arm. Now, that's the positive side. On the negative side, we still have different requirements that we have to meet from the Chinese government. One is traceability. 2 is a beta agonist restriction, and 3 is growth hormones. And so we've had a lot of conversation over the years, as a producer, and I'm just curious, how many cattle producers do we have in this audience? All right, we have a number of them, so you guys understand what I'm talking about. But as we look at those things, we've had a conversation quite often in our meetings at USMEF, more so recently because China's just opened up, but the fact that what are we really concerned with now? In the beginning, it was price. It's all about, I need that extra dollars, extra market price to make it worth my time to meet these requirements. But as we've moved through and examined our access issues in other countries, we found out that having that access is kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It neutralizes that impact that the price actually has. So there's more discussion about getting that market access, which we have in China now, but even though we have it, you still have these requirements that you have to meet. And we have product going into China, but it's on a slow scale at this point. But I think over time, the industry is going to have to decide, okay, which direction are we going to go? We see more and more as we address our customers' needs in other countries that it comes down to that. What are we going to do to meet their needs? Are we worried about the price, or are we worried about having market access? When I first got on the board at USMEF, we had a chart that showed all the different countries that had traceability alone, for example. And it's amazing how many countries throughout the world had a good system in place that could meet these kind of demands from the market. The U.S. is a little bit been slower on the beef side of things, not so much on the pork, but we're going to have to answer that question. Is it worth our time to find that system that works for us and meet what they're looking for? And in China, there are a lot of positives there, and I think that discussion is going to be ongoing.
Bruce, there are a lot of acronyms in agriculture. USMEF, for those in attendance that don't really know what the Export Federation does, could you explain?
The U.S. Meat Export Federation, and as we have our conversation, I might just shorten it down to MEF, but like a lot of you, I guess I'd ask the question, how many people really understand or know much about USMEF in this audience? Okay, we just have a few hands going up, and I got to confess, when I was asked to serve as the soybean or oilseed representative, run for that elective office on U.S. Meat Export Federation, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Many people ask me, well, you don't raise livestock, you're a corn and soybean guy, why are you on the U.S. Meat Export Federation? But when you look at it, that organization deals with any business that's connected to red meat exports. So whether you're a corn farmer, a soybean farmer, agribusiness person, a trader, purveyor, a packer, everybody has a hand. Everybody has a stake in what happens with our exports. And I mentioned earlier, we're not just a domestic market anymore. We're looking at increasing our profitability. It's going to have to come globally. When you look at the added value per head of cattle, it's roughly $250 to $270 that we wouldn't get marketing that domestically. On the pork side, we're roughly $50 to $55. And so those numbers, when you add them up in an industry or within your business, it gets to be pretty good size. And so if we're going to increase our profitability, like Yuri mentioned, we're going to have to address this and understand what the world market is asking for. And that's what USMEF does, try to get everybody involved in that chain dealing with red meat industry and make them understand what our challenges are and work together to meet those goals.
Thank you, Bruce. Tom Haag is to his left. He is a board member with the National Corn Growers Association. Tom, I'd like to begin by asking you a little bit about the Renewable Fuel Standard and the importance of the RFS to corn farmers and really agriculture overall, what you like about the RFS, if there were changes to be made, what you would like to see altered.
Thank you, Mark. You're right, but the RFS is very huge in the National Corn Growers Association. We've had some issues with the last administration where they didn't want to give us our gallons that we produce to make sure that we blended with our gasoline, whether they always kept it short. And so we always had some talking issues with them and trying to say what we would like to see, why they're not bringing it up to what the legislators and senators proposed for the rule, why they were always short. But we never really got a good answer out of them on that, but then when we have the new administration came in, we have our new EPA Director Pruitt from Oklahoma, who we thought, uh-oh, we could have some issues with him because of when he was the Attorney General in Oklahoma, filed some suits against ethanol in his state and didn't think it was a compatible thing to have into the gasoline. But, lo and behold, they brought the new EPA levels up to standards what Congress, the politicians set forth, so that was the good thing there for regular ethanol. And we still have some issues though with the cellulosic. It's just tougher to produce, it's more expensive to produce, so there's not as many plants out there producing that as the amount of gallons that they're looking for. But, you know, we support that type of industry, but it's just like I say, the corn blend ethanol is still a cheaper grade to make, or cheaper made, and you know, the clean air and all the other benefits that we get from it is a big positive for corn growers.
Tom, I remember talking to you as you were contemplating pursuing a seat on the NCGA board. Could you talk to the folks here today about why you felt it was important to have a Minnesota voice on a national board?
Sure. You know, we're the one of the northern states that went for a number of years without a delegate on or a board member to be on the corn board, the national corn board. And you know, if you want your voice to be heard, you have to be at the plate. And if you're not there, things can get mismuddled, or things just don't get understood back here in our state of Minnesota. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring last July during our corn congress, and lo and behold, I must have convinced enough people to vote for me, because I was one of the 4 people that got nominated or got voted on to the corn board. So I am on not quite a year. My first year is going to be up here in October, but being on the national, you all of a sudden move up to all the national policies that are going on. Where back when I was on the state, I'm still on the state board, but when you're on the state board, you really deal more with what goes on in your state. But now we have a lot more with the national, with the new farm bill coming up, NAFTA, health insurance, our crop insurance. So it's been a great run so far for my first 9 months, and I'm looking forward for the next time to continue to represent Minnesota on the national board.
Thank you, Tom. At the end of the table, we have Jim Compart. Jim is a board member with the National Pork Producers Council. And Jim, I wanted to begin our conversation with you when you think about the pork industry and potential threats. Foot and mouth disease is being talked about more and more. Could you touch on the potential threat of FMD and the importance of addressing the vaccine bank in the next farm bill?
Well, yes, Mark. Foot and mouth disease is something that we all should be extremely concerned, whether you're a hog producer, beef, corn farmer, soybean grower. Iowa State estimates that the loss in pork and beef would be about $128 million, billion dollars in the first 10 years. It'll affect corn growers about $44 billion and soybean growers $25 billion. And so it'll be devastating. Right now we're exporting 1 out of every 4 hogs that is produced in the United States is being exported. As you know, we're gearing up 5 new packing plants to expand into the emerging markets, like Bruce was talking about, what they've done with USMEF. And as soon as that happens, if we broke with foot and mouth, whether it's, you know, just people traveling or an act of terrorism, we are not sitting with any vaccine that we can use. The vaccine cannot be used or kept in the United States. There's 23 different strains of the virus, and it's found in many other countries, and countries that people are coming and going every day. And so the impact that would have on all of agriculture is immense. And so this is one thing that you know, pork producers really have not had a lot of real deep ties into the farm bill, you know, as far as a lot of asks for funding or anything. But if there was ever a need for all of agriculture, is to fund what's proposed a 5-year plan of about $150 million per year to get an active foot and mouth vaccine to be ready that we could bring into this country in the light of an outbreak. The amount of vaccine that we have on Plum Island would not be enough to vaccinate one county in Minnesota. And so we're very vulnerable, and it's something that everybody in agriculture needs to get behind.
Jim, not necessarily a policy question, but I remember a year ago there was a lot of anxiety about the fourth quarter hog market and what prices would do, and I'm sensing that there's not as much anxiety as we head closer to the fourth quarter this year. Is there more optimism on the pork market, would you say?
Mark, if I knew that, I wouldn't be here. It's hard to know. We've been, looking for a lot of hogs come to market all year. Demand's been excellent. Export demand's been excellent. Our friends down in Mexico are using a lot of pork, and hopefully we can keep, these free trade agreements open. And that's one item that we're very, very concerned about is, TPP, basically, that got shut down. Other countries that were involved with TPP have come in, like the European Union with Japan. Japan is our #1 value market, and the EU just signed a free trade agreement with Japan, and Mexico is signing free trade agreements with other countries, and we're going to be on the outside looking in pretty quick, and we need to get some trade. We're kind of gearing up that we're going to be looking at not only 1 out of 4 animals, but 1 out of 3 animals shortly with the production that's coming down the pipe. And so we need trade. Every time we have trade with other countries, our exports, increase. We've increased 1,550% of production since 1989. That's the amount of exports, and that was our very first free trade agreement was in 1989. So these trade agreements are vital to all of agriculture, and we sure would like some support by everybody. If you're a corn grower, the best thing you can do, or a soybean grower, is get behind your livestock industry. That industry is live and well and is using a lot of your product.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to have one follow-up question that any or all of our panelists can take, and then we're going to have Kent roaming with the wireless mic. Kent will have some questions for our group too, but I did want to ask about free trade agreements, specifically the North American Free Trade Agreement, and as renegotiations begin later this month, what aspects of NAFTA, in your opinion, are working? What areas of NAFTA need to be changed to benefit the groups that you represent? Whoever wants to take that first. Bruce?
NAFTA has been beaten to death lately. We've had a lot of discussion on it. We all know the advantage of it. We have open access, duty-free trade between the North American countries. It's been nothing but a positive for animal agriculture. In any trade agreement, there's always room for improvement. Even though we're not a policy organization, we look at those trade agreements at USMEF very closely, and we try to determine what technical market part of those agreements really impact us as producers, and even on the corn soybean side as well as red meat. When you look at NAFTA, there are a couple areas that can be tweaked a little bit. One is in the sanitary and phytosanitary area, dealing with audits, certification, various things like that. And the other thing that people haven't thought about as much lately is e-commerce. E-commerce has taken off huge. When you look at China, things that have happened over there, it's an area that we have to address. Make sure we aren't seeing regulations or a regulatory process that limits our ability in e-commerce to do trade there. So with NAFTA, hopefully we can maintain that access, that free trade, duty-free access, and address some of these issues for improvement.
Tom?
Yeah, we just had the opportunity 2 weeks ago when we were in D.C. at our Corn Congress, where all the states came together. The ambassador to Mexico, to the United States, spoke to our group. And he is very, very welcome that we are having these meetings to get NAFTA back on board. Just, you know, just for corn producers alone, from 1994 to 2016, they imported $40 billion worth of corn products from our country. Last year alone, they had $3.4 billion. So you can see, being just Mexico, being the neighbor, how important that is for us, for corn farmers, to have these talks going on. And one thing that we did find out when we were out there is that our new Ag Secretary from Skippy's hometown, or state of Georgia, was only on the job for about 2 to 3 days and got involved with the NAFTA talks, and his conversation there made sure that talks are continued, that they weren't shut off. So that's a big plus for that, you know, new on the job, and he's working all by himself, yet he doesn't have a lot of staff underneath him, but that will come. But NAFTA is also important that Mexico realizes there may be some indifferences between the trade. They want to make sure they're fair. And another reason Mexico would like to see a NAFTA agreement done is because next year there's a new president coming into Mexico to be elected. And one would never know what happens with the new administration coming in. So it is very positive that we have these NAFTA talks coming up in the next months.
Zippy?
Yeah, well, you know, the first approach we take is do no harm. If you look at the history of that trade treaty, trade in agricultural products went from $8 billion to $38 billion over the lifetime. So we know it's been a really good, positive trade treaty for agriculture. So let's don't do it any harm. When I was in the room with the president a couple of months ago, one of the questions that one of the 15 farmers asked was about trade. And he says, you know, I understand the gains that agriculture's made, but I also understand the losses the rest of America have. He says, I'm going to protect what y'all have got, and I'm going to do better for you and everyone else. So, you know, I think we've got to have a little confidence in this man. And if you look at the people he's put in place in positions that are going to be dealing with trade, it makes you feel good and feel confident that they're going to do some good things. Secretary Perdue was mentioned. The incident that he talked about is exactly right. If Secretary Perdue had not been in the room the day he was in the room, the picture of renegotiating NAFTA would look different today. Secretary Perdue is a farmer. He's a very understanding of agriculture all across America. He'll be in Minnesota Friday, and he's interested in learning just like I did. He is a servant to rural America and wants to make sure that agriculture is left in better shape after he leaves than it is now, though. So trade is so crucial, but there are some areas, and I'd like to mention that. As traveling the country, if you go to South Florida, NAFTA is not a positive thing, because the growing season, same as it is in Mexico. Mexico uses America as a dumping ground and brings the price of things way, way down. And we've almost lost all our tomato growers in South Florida because of that. So there are things that we need to fix in the fruit and vegetable area. Then if you go to the northeast and north of here, talk about a dairyman, some of the milk that's been traded into Canada has been cut off. And we want to make sure that another country can't change their pricing system to get around the rules of a trade treaty. That was what's so important about TPP. They had modern rules built in that new trade treaty, and we need to modernize the rules in NAFTA to make sure that when another country cheats, that we can call their hand on it and be able to make sure that we find some solution to that. And then, you know, you could talk about what's going on with wine across New York over to Canada. They changed some of the qualifications or rating of wheat when it goes across from food wheat to grain wheat. And, you know, we want to make sure that there's fairness in those areas that are a little bit weak in the trade. So even though we didn't want to renegotiate it, there are areas that we can look at and make it stronger for the American farmer and rancher.
Gary?
That renegotiating NAFTA, that's one of the things that Farmers Union, we agreed. We're glad to hear that the new administration, President Trump, saying that. We've always felt that NAFTA, you know, there's a lot of positives to it, but the last year or so now, actually our ag trading deficit has increased. So we're actually starting to import a little more than we have. So, you know, the overall picture, and Zippy mentioned a number of the different segments that need to be fixed, but there's a lot of areas, I guess as Farmers Union, we look at, are we going to, these trade agreements have to be fair. Are they going to increase the prices to whether it's Bruce here raising soybeans or Tom corn or the hogs or whatever it is? Is that price going to reflect back on the farm? Or are we just having trade agreements, we drive the prices down for the Mexican farmers, we driving the prices down for our farmers? That doesn't do any good. The only good that does is the conglomerates that are doing the actual trading. We need prices that reflect back on the farm to help our producers. We need that level playing field. Zippy pointed out a few things. Actually, Canada, we have dairy. Canada kind of wants it with both ways on the dairy issue. So, you have to come to the table, and it's one of the things we're encouraged that we were a little disappointed that Sonny Perdue was the last this ag secretary appointed and confirmed to his appointment. So he was kind of put behind the 8 ball before he started, but he's off to a good start, and he still has some people to fill in his office with the trade ambassadors and stuff. He has put some good people in, so hopefully we can move forward and actually fix it. We all want to trade, we all agree on that, but they have to be level. They have to be where we can compete and where we actually improve the price to our producers on the farm, keep them on the farm.
Jim, did you want to add anything else on NAFTA?
Well, NAFTA is really important to pork production as well as all, corn and soybean growers in Minnesota. $48 is the exact number of what exports are for pork. So $48 per pig is what pigs are worth more today because we do have exports. Mexico is our largest volume market for exports. Japan is number 2. Actually, Canada is the second, or I'm sorry, Mexico's the largest volume, second largest value market. Japan's our largest value market, for high muscle cuts. Canada is number 4th in value and in volume. So you take number 1 and number 4 out of pork production, and we're exporting 1 out of 4 pigs, pushing 1 out of 3. That's a lot of, 1 out of 3 hog barns you see out, or 1 out of 4 hog barns that you see is going as an export. And we cannot have tariffs put in place. This is the issue that we have right now with Japan. That's one thing that TPP was, rounding out, was getting rid of some of the tariffs that were involved with Japan and other countries. And we cannot be put at a disadvantage exporting product out of this country with tariffs. And so the North American Free Trade Agreement was a huge boon for U.S. agriculture, and we need to keep both those countries wide open, and we need to add on to some new ones.
Mark,
Thanks.
we got a question out here. I think we'll go out here and there'll be more chances to comment up there. Just a reminder, the ground rules. If you got a question, give your name, where you're from, and keep your question brief. And just like the Jeopardy game show, keep it in the form of a question. So here's Kevin Papp.
It's a lot of rules, Kent. Kevin Papp, Blue Earth County. Every one of you have talked about trade and the importance of trade. But with no transportation, there is no trade. Whether it's our crops here or that 1 out of 4 hog barns to be exported, are we doing enough for transportation to get it to the port, to get it to where we need to? Talk a little bit more about transportation and what's going on. Are we doing enough for our infrastructure?
Who'd like to take that first? Gary?
As I mentioned earlier, Kevin, in my comments, we haven't done a major infrastructure bill since the Eisenhower administration, Interstate Commerce Act. So frankly, no, we're not doing enough. We need to invest more. The locks and dams is one, a good issue. Rail, the ports, all over it. We are not doing enough. And like I said earlier, some of the other countries have stepped up. China is one that's really stepping up. Brazil, and so they're improving their infrastructure. We're just kind of leaving ours coast and not. No, we need a federal program, and that's the one thing the administration or the president did campaign on. So we're hopeful that he can put something forward soon. At this time he hasn't put anything forward, so we're hoping that something comes forward and the Congress takes a bipartisan look at it.
Zippy?
Yeah, I think the president has made a commitment to put America back to work, and what better way to do that than rebuild our infrastructure. And I had the privilege to come to Minnesota last year. Kevin took me on a tour of the locks and dams, something that I had never experienced, learned a lot about it, so I'm able to express the concerns there. And then, of course, if you got the president talking about infrastructure, rebuilding and putting people back to work, you got to think about what Secretary Perdue thinks about it. And when I talked to Secretary Perdue, I asked him one day, why was trade important, and why did we have a good chance to be one of the big leading trade countries in the world? He said two things: the productivity of our great farmers and ranchers across this country, and the reliability that we provide the world. And that reliability is provided through a great infrastructure that we have enjoyed for years, but have used it up and worn it out. So you have a Secretary of Agriculture and a President that are talking about rebuilding infrastructure so that we can continue to be that reliable customer to the world. Because if you go to a country like India and they want to buy something, they don't want it every other month. They want it regularly, and they want to be able to depend on it. They're not going to go to a country where the infrastructure is broken and it hasn't even been established yet. They want to go to a reliable source to keep their people calm and happy. So America has a position in the world to be the leader in trade, and we just need to maintain that by rebuilding our infrastructure and investing in it. And that infrastructure doesn't stop at roads and bridges and locks and dams. It goes to broadband, like Gary mentioned a while ago, for many different reasons, broadband. And then it goes into the research and development area of our land-grant colleges. A lot of our colleges have not got the federal funds that they needed to keep that infrastructure going, and we need our land-grant colleges up to speed, get that infrastructure built back so they can keep us on the cutting edge. Those are the people that we trust at our land-grant colleges in their research and development, and it all comes together in something that makes us very tractable to the world.
Anyone else on transportation infrastructure? Bruce?
Kevin, thank you for asking that question. I want to echo Zippy's comments there. Reliability, that is key right here. Although USMEF, that isn't our focus, transportation issues, we recognize what an impact that's had on our ability to export red meat products. If you remember a couple of years ago when the West Coast had their work slow down on the ports, that had a huge impact on reliability of the customers that we work really hard to gain their trust and credibility with. MEF hosts a lot of trade teams, various countries, Japan, China, and when we host those countries, that connection one-on-one goes a long ways. If you can make that connection with them, have a chance to meet them face-to-face, you've got your foot in the door. And if we can't continue to provide a reliable product consistently, they'll go someplace else. And so in the end, that was real key for us. We had to go back, reestablish those partnerships, spend an awful lot of time and effort gaining their respect and trust back again. So reliability is key. And it's something that all of us in this room need to work on. It doesn't take a lot, but just to mention here or there to your local organizations, your representatives, senators, it's something we all have to keep after and keep on the forefront.
Okay, Mark, we got another question.
Let's go out to the audience.
Earl Sheeler from Meeker County, Minnesota, southern Meeker County, Minnesota. And I see you guys are talking about agriculture and trade and how important it is for us to access markets across the world and basically try and find a market for a lot of, like you said, hogs, corn. A lot of our corn goes to Mexico, and a lot of our soy products go out to further in the oriental parts and stuff like that. And a lot of our poultry products also go overseas. And a lot of these, one thing we need land for our purchase to grow these kind of commodities to feed these animals and stuff like that. And a lot of my renters and stuff like that, they got to compete with these sugar producers, and they get 3 times the world market for their product because it's a closed market. But when we go out there and sell, like eggs now, they're 49 cents at well, how are we going to compete with this for, they can bid $10,000 for land. How can everybody else compete?
Anybody want to take that? Bruce?
Go ahead, Gary. I'll follow you.
you're criticizing the sugar market there, which very rightfully falls slow. That's an industry that's directly competing on a global market, a very political market. That market, a lot of the other countries, they heavily subsidize their sugar producers. That's why your sugar is basically a dump market. They're protected on a floor price. If the USDA runs the program correctly, it comes at no cost to the government. So it has a program that has worked out well, but as you say, you're rightly so. There maybe if they're having a few good years, they can bid up the rent. There's no doubt about that. But it is an industry that would collapse if it didn't have the protection of the federal sugar program, and it does do a lot of economic good as far as providing jobs in Minnesota and the Dakotas.
As far as how do we compete, I became involved with Minnesota soybean growers and U.S. Meat Export Federation because of that very question. Early on in my involvement, it started with the livestock industry and how do we compete, how do we make a profit? If you look at how the livestock industry has evolved over the years, what have we gone from? We've gone from small family farms to production systems that are more efficient, more dependable, have better housing conditions for livestock, and we've been able to compete on that level. And Gary's right, it's hard to compete with subsidized countries, but yet we found a way to do that. Regardless of whether the dollar is strong or not, we still find a way to do that. And so if we're going to compete, we have to look at what are we going to do as producers to make that transition. I know we're always looking at the neighbor across the road and saying, well, he's getting more or whatever, but over the years we found a way to do that. And I remember a few years ago coming to Farm Fest, some of you might know Don Scheffelbein, a big beef producer. He talked a lot about regulations, and if we are allowed within the regulatory system to do what we do best, produce corn, beans, livestock, we find a way to do that regardless of what the competition is. So I think it's, I'm probably being a little generic here, but I think American ingenuity goes a long ways, and we just adapt to those problems.
Tom?
One of the things about being a farmer, we can all have our little niche where we want to go, what we want to do, what we want to produce. I know we're up against the, like you say, you mentioned sugar beets or whatever. One of the things that happened for corn 20 years ago is when we had all the dirty cities with the air pollution, and all of a sudden we have ethanol coming in. So there are niches out there for farmers to do. It's just that, each one of us have to try to find our own little niche in farming to make things positive and be able to continue to farm and hopefully then pass it on to our sons or daughters that want to continue to farm.
Okay, I think we got another question out here.
Gene Brown, I live in northern Iowa. I take the comment that was made about competition and farmers are being more efficient with their large operations. It depends on what you're looking at. It depends on if you're looking at the fact that large livestock farms are set up in a system that will enable viruses to go through these. I've talked to friends of mine who raise hogs for large integrators, and they say, you haven't seen what's coming yet. So if you're talking about efficiency, maybe, yeah, if you have less than 5 companies who control the market, then you can be in the market, but a smaller guys can't. So what are we going to do to not just get in the niche market, but what can we do to actually have people in the marketplace in an open market?
Jim, did you want to tackle that one?
Well, as agriculture has grown, there's been efficiencies in pig flows that has actually managed health in ways that we didn't know years ago. I grew up on a family farm. We had, 200 sows when we started, and we had 3 families living off that. And as your families come in, bringing in the next generation, you know, some of these bigger systems have allowed sons or daughters to build a barn, given them an opportunity to get involved with agriculture. And without that opportunity, there wouldn't have been a way for them to get involved with agriculture and start farming. And so, you know, in a lot of respects, you know, the majority of these barns that you're seeing out there are owned by families. You know, new farmers coming involved is who's building them and who's taking care of the pigs in those barns.
Anybody else on that? Ken, we have another question in the audience.
We sure do.
Yeah. Jay Hansen, farmer from Nicollet County, Minnesota. My question revolves around health care. There's been talk about taking what's wrong with the Affordable Care Act and fixing it. Now, what would be any solutions that anybody on the panel has heard as to how we could fix health care?
Okay. The one thing, Kent, or the one thing we've heard is both parties need to get together, sit down. Everybody's got ideas. Nobody's got the perfect idea. If it was that easy, you know, it would have been solved. But you got a lot of major groups asking for that now. So we're hoping, I guess as Farmers Union, I've heard that message a lot as we've been out meeting with members. They're tired of people playing politics with their health care. So hopefully with the Senate's failure this last week to do what they wanted to do, the repeal and replace, hopefully there's a little more bipartisanship. And as Senator John McCain said it very well, we need to go back to regular order, hold committee hearings, talking to the people who are involved, and come up with a solution. So.
And with the commodity groups, the timing of these escalating healthcare costs when margins are tighter, that just compounds the problem.
Anybody got questions? Raise your hand. Now's the time. We got one way over here. We'll head over.
Again, just raise your hand and Kent will bring the microphone to you.
Jim Connor, St. Paul. What can we do to support more the natural growers, the organic growers? What can we do to help them more? There's a growing consumer demand for natural food.
That is one of the bright spots, actually, you know, as farmers are getting larger, and a lot of times, you know, you're forced to get larger just to try and make it, but that is a bright spot out there, that the organic or the natural, or whatever you want to call it, the smaller niche markets is a rapidly growing part of the farm sector. So, you know, the one thing that organic rules, you know, the USDA to keep the organic rules, so they actually when it's organic, it means organic. I guess we have a little concern, you know, with the Walmarts and that type of stuff getting into the role of really going to that. If you turn it into mass production, then you're going to lose it. If everybody was organic, the premium wouldn't be there. So it's a market that works for some, it doesn't work for all, and we need to protect it so it actually works. Provide the consumer that choice.
Anybody else on organic?
Any other? Go ahead.
I'll take a stab at that. In addition to my USMEF hat, I'm still on the Minnesota Soybean Growers Association board, the policy board. And, you know, we talk a lot about adding traits to different products, corn and soybeans, but yet we also recognize the niche markets, the food grade beans. We've spent a lot of effort, a lot of checkoff dollars working on making connections with Japan, Asian countries, on promoting food grade beans over there. When we had a chance to go to St. Paul, that always comes up in conversation. So just for your satisfaction, I guess, know that from the Minnesota soybean, we have been working on trying to promote those markets, working with our legislators on doing what it takes to get, you know, increase that availability and that potential.
Tom.
Well, I know just from our state organization, Minnesota Corn, and the national, it's something that you'll never see us downgrading the natural or the organics. We don't blast them or anything like that. That's the one niche that those farmers that are into that are doing, and, you know, more power to them if they can succeed going that way and supplying that type of food that some of the individuals out there would like to see.
I'd like to ask a question about the next generation of farmers and some of the hurdles they're facing and what can be done at the state and federal level to assist them as they try to begin a career in farming.
That's one piece. The Minnesota State Legislature this year, last year, we did pass a beginning farmer piece where if you want to rent or sell your farm to a beginning farmer, and a beginning farmer is just classified as somebody that's been farming 10 years or less, you do get a state tax credit back if you rent or sell to a beginning farmer. So that's one thing we were able to work on at this last legislative session to help. How many it'll help, we don't know. I have talked to one member that said they thought they were going to be able to take advantage of that. They had a landlord they were renting from, and he was real receptive to selling them to his daughter of the farm or part of the farm, and so that's hopeful. A federal farm bill, you got beginning farmer pieces in there, but obviously the huge amount of capital required to buy farmland, then the amount of capital required to run a farm. So it is a huge problem that is definitely gotten a lot worse. But we've made a few small steps.
Yeah, access to land. Anyone else on that? Bruce? Tom?
Mark, in my neighborhood, between Owatonna and Rochester, Dodge County, we've had, we don't have a lot of land that qualifies for CRP type land. It's all flat, good crop land. So consequently, we don't have a good area for pastures, put beef cattle out there, or open range products. In our area, if a young guy wants to get involved, land is hard to come by, hard to cash rent land. Prices are too high for most of them. The only opportunity is if you want to look at some sort of animal agriculture, maybe if you can find a niche market, but for the most part, putting up, in my area, basically a hog production facility. The limiting factor, and this has been why I got involved a long time ago, is regulations, planning and zoning issues. And even though I'm working on a national level now in a different area, this is kind of what motivated me to begin with. We had a case recently that was just settled in Minnesota Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, where one individual put up a hog building, a young guy, and because of our ability to challenge that one building, this young man and his family spent over $250,000 defending themselves when they met all the rules and regulations. So, when you look at that type of resistance, that type of system that allows a person to be put under the gun, so to speak, the expenses that occur, this is an area we can address locally within your own townships, within your own counties. So when you look at opportunity for young people, you can start at your own local level and do what you can to make sure that these kids get a chance to become involved in agriculture.
Anybody else on that before we go back to the audience? Tom? Sure.
Just a good comment on that. I think that is one of the reasons we always kid around in our offices or whatever with all the old gray hairs that are sitting at the board and all that. But that's one of the reasons why we want to get involved and make sure, because we want to make sure we have that opportunity for that young kid or that young gal to farm. And I have a son that's farming with me, that's been with me for going on 5 years now. And that's one thing that's going to be important in this new farm bill, is that we do not have any cuts with our crop insurance. Because if they didn't have the crop insurance out there, when they go to their lender, the lender's going to say, no, you don't have enough equity built up and things like that in your young career. So that's one of the highlights in the national with this new farm bill, is that we want to make sure crop insurance stays right where it's at, that we don't have the cuts, and they leave it alone.
Okay, we got another question here.
Hi, Greg Bohr from St. Paul. Could you talk a little bit about your natural resource and conservation priorities for this next farm bill?
Natural resources.
CRP.
Yep.
Well, of course, conservation is a very important part of the Farm Bill, and a lot of the areas that livestock producers can take advantage of the Farm Bill is in conservation. So we're very interested in trying to maintain that support that's there, and I know that the Secretary is interested in those programs that that are in the Farm Bill, and I know that he wants to provide quality service to you. I've heard him talk about, I want to provide the best quality service to our customers, which is the farmers and ranchers across this country. But we need to continue to find different ways to help farmers to work on their conservation, because that's what not only leaves our farms in better shape for our children, but those are those partnerships I was talking about. It goes the same way in conservation. We have to have the partnership through the federal government to let the general public, by way of support of conservation, help them contribute to conserving our natural resources that we enjoy so much. So on our list, it's very important that we maintain that.
What about opening up CRP acres in the next Farm Bill with prices where they're at?
Well, you know, it really depends on who you're talking to, whether they want it opened up or not. If you're a young farmer, you don't want it opened up. You want to see some of that go away because you want some land to be available to you. And in a lot of places, I hear a lot of concerns from young farmers and farmers in general that CRP and the price that they're paying is too much, so it makes the availability of land very difficult. So you know, it really depends on who you're talking to, but I think there's more people saying that we ought to have that cap and it ought to stay there, and we really ought to fix some of the formulas that come to the price of that land.
On the opening up the CRP, I know one of the criticisms, and Zippy mentioned too, right now the contract, well, Minnesota we're full, but the contracts, some of the, with the low prices of the commodities, you know, some people are putting land, will potentially put land into CRP to get a CRP payment and actually take that land away from a young farmer that could possibly rent that. We think, you know, the CRP land should be more targeted to the land that's not productive. That's the land that should go into it. As you drive around, you see some very productive land that has gone into CRP because of that situation. Then the other point is working lands. Obviously we believe we need a strong conservation title in the next Farm Bill, but we think there should be a little more focus on working lands programs like the CSP program, programs where pay a farmer a payment, adequate payments to keep that land in production, but in a working lands program where we all benefit. The farmer's still able to farm the land, and it does a benefit of cleaning up the water or improving soil health.
Tom?
The one thing with the national corn is encouraging the CRP to say where we're at, to make sure that we continue just the target areas. We don't want to see whole farms going into CRP. We want to see that sensitive area or the sensitive land going in. And I know one thing tomorrow with the hearing session going on with Ag Chairman Conaway and Ranking Member Peterson, when we were in D.C. talking to Peterson realizes there are some things that he would like to see to CRP, maybe bring the price of the per acre down a little bit and tweak some things this way or that way to make CRP very much into the forefront yet. I'm saying it's there, and to make sure that it's not being over competitive for the young farmers to try to rent that ground instead of the government renting the ground. So there is some concern, but there are need for the CRP in certain areas.
Again, if you have a question for our panel, please just raise your hand and Kent will come to you.
I'm going to throw one in that we haven't talked about yet, and maybe one some people don't want to talk about, but one of the challenges I think we have in agriculture, whether it's production agriculture or processing, we talk a lot about building up rural America, but as workforce, finding adequate workforce, I think Zippy Duvall hit on a little bit with education and land-grant universities, but also besides education, which you can certainly comment on, and is the immigration policies and how that might affect our workforce out here. So I'd like to throw that out to our panel to have a little discussion about workforce and immigration issues.
As I travel the country, those 45 states I've already been to, the number one issue I hear from farmers is labor. I mean, they get up in the morning wondering who's going to be out in the yard ready to go to work with them. And I've heard from Idaho to Colorado to Kansas to California to all the way to Maine and Florida. You know, my sons went to college and my daughters, and they're educated and they come back to farm, and we want them to be farmers. But the only limiting factor they have is labor. because they have the land, they have the water, they have everything available for them, but they can't expand their operations because there's not enough labor available. At Farm Bureau, we want to make sure that we have a workable, flexible guest worker program that any size farmer can use, and have it year-round, because dairy doesn't even fit the program that we have now. You know, we are a victim of a failed immigration system in this country. We support securing the borders, but we all support and finding solutions. And one of those solutions that we're interested in is some type of adjustment of status for farm workers that's been here for 10, 15, 20 years, that have families here that are not violent criminals. Of course, we all support taking all the violent criminals out and sending them back home. But if they're here and they're abiding by our laws and they're contributing to their communities, there needs to be some way to let those people come out of the shadow and have a work permit to be here and work. And we're hoping that we can find that. I know that just last week the conversation was around Mr. Chairman Goodlatte in the Judiciary Committee has a bill that he wants to push out to try to answer some of those questions. And it agrees with some of our policies and some of it doesn't agree with our policy. But we want to get that bill out of the committee so that we can help them debate the issues of that bill and try to find a solution to the problem that we have with farm labor. Good businessmen that are concerned about their rural communities can sit down and find a sensible, moral solution to this terrible problem that we have in America today. And it's the right thing to do, and we're looking forward to working with Mr. Goodlatte and all the other congressmen and senators to find a solution to that.
A consistent ag labor force. Anybody else on that?
Farmers Union, during some of our earlier meetings, we heard a lot from the fruit and vegetable growers, and there's a large concentration of them in central Minnesota. They rely heavily on the H-2A visa program to get their crop planted, harvested, and into the system, and they're running into trouble hiring workers too. They try and hire locally too, and that's out there. But out of the year, they only get 1 or 2 young people that'll come and work for them. And then the one fellow he talked to earlier, he said he had a couple of young guys from the Ukraine that had been working for him for 2 or 3 years. And he said they called him up in early March or whenever it was, and they told him, well, we can't come this year. And he asked them, how come? He said, oh, we can go to China. So they were going to go to China and work because of the rules. And he said they were very dependable, very good, hard workers. And he said they wanted to come back and work on his farm, but the immigration part, they were going to go to China. So that and he hires. He relies on those workers, those type of workers, to get his crop harvested, because frankly, he said they've exhausted the local help. They just don't have enough local workers to help them with their harvest.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
Just a quick comment. About 20 years ago, when I served on a planning and zoning board, we were working on a potential siting of a livestock business in our area. And we held several public hearings, a number of meetings on this. And we were aware of the need for migrant labor workforce in our area, but we weren't aware of how many non-ag businesses employed migrant labor force. And so that was a wake-up call for us, that it's something we have to address and account for, because these positions, they need those jobs, those workers there, and we've got to account for it somehow.
Okay, we got another question.
Lisa Black, Gibbon, Minnesota. My husband is a farmer. I'm his partner. He is the 4th generation. What can we do to ensure our son can continue this century farm without being swallowed up by the corporations around us like all of our neighbors have been?
Gary?
Back to profits on the farm. If you can, we need better prices. We need a better safety net that's targeted to the young farmers and not, or targeted to the family farm. Because if you're able to make a profit on your farm, you'll be able to keep your family on the farm. And that's what's driving us off the farm. You can talk regulations, all that type of stuff, but that's not what's driving. We're driving off the farmers' lack of profits.
I would say that every one of these gentlemen work with an organization, and we work very hard to be a partner with them to do that. And every one of these issues that we talked about this morning has to do with whether or not your son can continue that generational farm. I mean, you talk about, and you just mentioned it, I mean, you talk about labor, you talk about trade, you talk about regulation, you talk about endangered species. All of those things we work on as partners each and every day is trying to make a better future for you and your family and your son to be able to stay there on that farm. Are there new ideas? Yeah, I hope they are, because we're searching for them each and every day. And if you have an idea, I know every one of these gentlemen would love to hear it, because we would love to have it part. But you have to be part of an organization that you believe in. These gentlemen represent some fine organizations. And every one of their members, I go to work for every day, because we cover all the commodities. So you need to be part of both of us. You need your voice to be heard within our organization. You need to be engaged so that we can have your voice in our policies that we can deliver to the people that can make a difference in our lives.
Okay, Mark, we got another question here.
What do your organizations support to encourage farmers to incorporate more soil health practices on their operations? I noticed the newspaper today, the Farm Fest newspaper, features a couple of producers that have really put some investment into cover crops, adding diverse species, incorporating small-scale livestock on their operations. Are there policy incentives or things that you're working on in your own organizations on soil health?
Good question. Bruce?
Quick. From a Minnesota soybean standpoint, on our policy side and on our checkoff boards, we've worked with created a Discovery Farm system. You're probably, looks like you're aware of that. We put a lot of effort into that in several different locations. I think that's probably as much of a learning experience as anything we've done with that organization when it comes to conserving, doing conservation projects and working on improving the soil, and it's been a great benefit for all of us.
Tom?
I think also if you would just stop by the Minnesota Corn Growers booth, you'll notice that the innovation grants that we have there that are working with farmers on certain things on cover crops, and certain ones are setting pollinator areas away. So the farmers out there are concerned. We're just not out there to get the biggest bang and biggest bushels that we can. We know that we want to make sure we keep this ground available to pass down, because I'm a 4th-generation farmer. I've got the son 5th generation, and I got a grandson that's 6th, and I hope we can continue that going on. So we are concerned. So we are doing things to with the conservation side.
A great dialogue today. We are up against the clock, so we're going to move into brief closing comments, and we're going to start with Jim and then move our way towards Zippy.
Well, I wanted to comment about the great story that pork producers have about conserving you know, the manure, the fertilizer that we produce. We grow grain, we feed the grain to the animals. We actually hold ourselves to a higher standard than commercial fertilizer that is being spread on the fields. We're not able to spread our manure as high a level of nitrogen and phosphorus levels that you would with commercial fertilizers. So pork has a great story, you know, as far as for the environment, and we're very proud of that. In closing, I guess one thing that, you know, we've all talked about trade, and trade's very important. Foot and mouth disease, let's all pray that it doesn't happen, but we need to be ready. And there's a lot of crazy things that have happened the last few years that nobody would have expected 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and what's happening in our world. And I think it's time for, you know, to talk to our congressmen and senators and wake them up, because this is going to have a huge gaping hole in agriculture. And you think it's hard out there running corn and soybeans right now with the prices we're running. If you lose your livestock market, there's not going to be, you know, you're going to be lucky to be half the price of where we're at today on our commodities.
Jim Compart with MPPC. Thank you, Jim. Tom?
I think one thing, if you've listened to us all today, all our organizations, no matter what we represent or whatever, in the long run, all work together. You know, if we raise the corn, we raise soybeans for the livestock industry. So we're all intertwining. It just, I'm encouraging the young generation to get involved with an organization. That is one of the biggest things you can do to make sure your voice is heard. that you get your things across, no matter if it's at the county level, the state level, or where I'm at the national level. You have to make sure you're communicating with your local politicians and your national politicians, because if we don't talk with them or email them or whatever, they think things are fine back home, and our counterparts are there every day talking and telling them the bad things we're doing and not the good things we're doing. So I just encourage the younger generation to get involved. I know they have a tough time with time, but you will find out in the long run it's the best thing that can happen to you.
Tom Haag with NCGA. Bruce?
Earlier you heard Jim and Tom talk about our export markets and what a huge number that represents comes back to us. A lot of times that goes right over my head. I want to know what does that represent my farm individually. And recently we completed a study on the corn side of things. What are animal ag exports, what does that result in cents per bushel? And when you looked, when I believe the study was done at 360 corn, 45 cents was the number that come back to us. 45 cents out of every bushel of corn that's exported through livestock industry, red meat industry, comes back to me directly. If you do the math on 200 bushel corn, right now, when we're talking an under $3 price, that's a huge impact. We're in the middle of finishing the study on soybeans to find out what that impact is per bushel, but I'm sure that's going to be a pretty good substantial number. So when you look at those things, not being a livestock producer, I realize the impact animal ag has in my business as a corn and soybean producer. Those numbers mean a lot to me. The comment was made about what do we do to bring our sons and daughters back into it. Supporting, in my mind, supporting animal ag, the red meat export industry has a lot to do with making our farms profitable. One other quick thing that we haven't talked much about is funding. At USMEF, we get a fair amount of our funding from the MAP and FMD programs, and maybe you'll recall President Trump suggested zero funding for those programs. But fortunately, we've seen both houses or both sides of the Congress pretty much supporting funding that at the high level. So if that happens, rest assured that we're going to be in pretty good shape, but what we do as an organization really depends on that funding. So again, whatever you can do, it's mentioned here before, but contact your senators, representatives, and encourage that funding level to be supported.
Bruce Schmoll, U.S. Meat Export Federation. Gary?
Yeah, Tracy, I want to address your question a little bit on what are the organizations doing for soil health. I think with the low economics or the tough economics of trying to cash flow a farmer, I think farmers are going to be a little more receptive to doing some changes to try and keep their farm profitable. And Minnesota Farmers Union, we're actually sponsoring a field day on August 11th at the Rod Summerfield Farm in southeastern Minnesota on soil health. So you can go on our website, mfu.org, and find a location. So we are, farmers are looking at it. I got a neighbors that actually put cover crop in rye last year, and they, so it is starting to happen. Minnesota Farmers Union, all the different organizations up here, we vastly are going to agree on the majority of the time. There's always going to be some policy issues we disagree on, but the vast majority of the time we're going to be working together on the Farm Bill and on various pieces for rural Minnesota. Minnesota, we're pretty fortunate. We have Senator Klobuchar's on the Ag Committee, and Senator Franken, he helped write the energy title in the last Farm Bill. And we have three congressmen on the Ag Committee. Congressman Colin Peterson is the lead Democrat, and Congressman Waltz and Congressman Nolan. So Minnesota, we're well representative on the Ag committees in debate as they go into the next Farm Bill. But the bottom line, it goes back to we got to have profits on the farm. If we don't have profits on the farm, all the other stuff we talk about don't make a darn bit of difference. So we got to have profits on the farm.
MFU President Gary Werdish. Zippy?
Gary said it just right. It's been interesting for me to sit here and have this conversation with all you wonderful people and realize that I haven't heard the word sustainability unless y'all mentioned it while I was outside doing an interview. But sustainability is a buzzword that's running rampant across our country, and we have food companies that are taking that word and marketing around it and influencing the way that we can grow our crops or raise our cattle. I stand here to tell you that sustainability is our word. There's no other organization, no other industry that's more sustainable than agriculture. But the only sustainable agriculture is a profitable agriculture, like Gary just said. Policy plays a big role in that. And the way policy is going to get shaped and us for influence the future is going to depend on whether we, all of us, keep our grassroots engaged in the process. You're going to have 2 congressmen here in the morning that are very influential in our part of the world, in our part of the industry. And we need to be there telling them what we need to do, but we also, when they stand up for us, we need to stand behind them. We need to be at every town hall meeting. Some of these gentlemen and ladies are taking a beating because they're trying to represent us. And all the issues that we've discussed, and I agree with what they've all said about the issues here this morning. But there's one thing about sustainability I want to talk about. If you turn your attention from policy and look at public opinion, and someone says, well, they're wrong. Well, I agree. A lot of their opinion is wrong. But they've gotten their opinion from Facebook and Twitter, social media, and the young people that's coming into the world that's going to be making the rules and regulations in the future are getting led the wrong way. I'm 61 years old, and I'm challenged to use my phone and my iPad to promote what I do on the farm. But ladies and gentlemen, we have got to do it. To stay sustainable means that we got to educate the public, and we got the best tool in the world to do it, and it's the technology that we're carrying around in our front pocket. We need to just quit being so busy, be mindful of what we're doing, and show the good stories of American agriculture on social media so that those young people that's going to be making those policies get educated in the right way. It's our responsibility. So I would end with this. It's our time. We have the right people in the right place, Mr. Pruitt, Mr. Perdue, Mr. Zinke, and President that wants to do a lot of things that we agree with. And it's our time to stay engaged and continue to change the direction of this country to make agriculture and rural communities thrive for the future. It is our time to make a difference. And we're only going to be successful if everybody takes on their responsibility as an American and be keyed in and engaged in this great American process that we know as a citizen. So I challenge you, whether it's through their website or ours, stay up on the issues that are being discussed in Washington and pull that phone out and Facebook and go on Twitter and tell the wonderful stories in agriculture, because the good stories in agriculture outnumber the bad ones by thousands. And my daughter, who works in a congressman's office today, says when an issue is up, the communications we get from animal rights people, environmentalists, will just stack up on her desk. But what she hears from the farmers will just be a little stack. That means every one of us have got to be engaged, because those numbers do make a difference at the end of the day. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, Mark. I've enjoyed it. I have so much respect for these gentlemen to my left, and I just enjoy working with them each day. I know that they are proud to represent you, and I am proud to represent you at American Farm Bureau.
Zippy Duvall, President of American Farm Bureau. It's been a pleasure being a part of this dialogue today. And before we show our appreciation for our panelists, I also want to include Kent Teesey, because Kent is instrumental in putting together these forums each year, and so I certainly want to make sure that he gets recognized too. So let's hear it for our group today.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you for being the moderator, and thanks to Zippy and the rest of our panel here. Great discussion today, a lot of key topics, and as Zippy said, tomorrow morning the U.S. House Ag Committee's here from 9:30 to noon. If you can come back, be here. Great opportunity to address them during the forum, but certainly to talk to them informally as well. Want to remind everyone, in just a few minutes, we'll have the Linder Farm Network Noon Show right here on stage. And then at 1:15 this afternoon, one of the topics we talked about up here, transitioning to the next generation of farmers, opportunities and challenges, another great panel. So enjoy the rest of your day here at Farm Fest.